I love Superman and Lois. If you haven't seen it, I recommend watching this mini movie that's at the beginning of episode 1. It's what got me hooked on this show. It's such a refreshing take on Superman. And if I could sum up this show in one word, it would be thoughtful. There are so many careful, insightful aspects to this show. Clark and Lois are raising their twin sons in Smallville after moving from Metropolis. By focusing on an older Lois and Clark, the show respects other live-action versions of Superman by not treading familiar ground. We've already seen other versions of the origin story and their early relationship. The jump forward in time allows for exploration of issues beyond the classic origin story tropes. And at the same time, the origin story tropes get recontextualized through their sons, Jonathan and Jordan. What worked for Clark might not work for his sons. The characters react to situations in genuine, unexpected ways that subvert the audience's expectations. This makes everything feel real and honest, despite all the crazy superhero stuff that happens. I find myself thinking about things differently after watching each episode. I'm still trying to articulate this nuance, but some other screen versions of Superman relied on moral superiority for his goodness. This Superman, however, has this flipped. He's a truly good man first, and his morals stem from that. I haven't even mentioned the cinematography or the music. This show is faith in humanity affirming. In addition to these things, I noticed a season-spanning plot line that elevates the storytelling even further. There's an embedded social commentary in Superman and Lois about divorce. To understand it, we'll have to jump back in time to the 1980s. There's an article on crack.com titled, "Why Every 80s Sitcom Decided to Kill Off the Mom." The article has more in-depth insights than I have time for here, so I'll put a link in the description. I highly recommend reading it. TV shows at the time were trying to redefine the family sitcom by throwing in an additional element to disrupt the normal nuclear family. Some shows tried subtracting characters. The article lists off a slew of sitcoms from the 80s where the mother was deceased or otherwise absent. Audiences embraced these shows in particular. Sitcoms are a reflection of their time, but there wasn't a sudden increase in deceased mothers in that decade. So what was going on? Well, divorce. No-fault divorce laws were becoming standard in the United States. Single parenthood was on the rise, and no one knew what the long-term consequences would be. The article states, "Now you have a social climate where no one quite knows how the collapse of the family institution will affect the kids in the next generation, but they're pretty sure that the answer is badly. Everyone is at least privately terrified that family is the heart of the social structure, and when it fails, the whole system will fail as well. Mothers were the glue of the family, and her absence signifies the dissolution of the family." So, inadvertently, these sitcoms with the deceased mother addressed anxieties around divorce. What would happen to families if a parent was absent? If the glue of the family was absent? Well, in these sitcoms, audiences were comforted to see that families could still function even after they were fractured by one parent leaving. So, with this in mind, let's take a look at Superman and Lois. In Season 1, a mysterious man in a metal suit shows up and starts antagonizing Superman. He also tries to befriend Lois Lane. Across several episodes, we learn these key pieces of information. 1. He is from a different universe. 2. He was married to Lois Lane, and they had a daughter together. 3. The alternate universe Superman killed Lois Lane and destroyed their world alongside other superpowered beings. 4. In hiding, he and his daughter worked together to build a suit that could kill Superman. While fighting Superman, he somehow traveled to Clark and Lois's universe. 5. His name is John Henry Irons, and he believes that the same thing that happened to his universe will happen in this universe. He knows it's too late for his world. However, he is trying to warn Lois and stop Superman. All of this information comes together in episode 8, which is one of my favorites. Lois and Clark finally learn what the audience knows. After a fight with Superman, John Henry gets taken to the DoD for questioning. John tells Superman about what happened in his world. Notice how this framing with the two-way mirror puts Superman's reflection in the same frame as John, which represents the dual universes. It feels like he's talking to a Superman that's not there. Meanwhile, Lois and Jonathan investigate John's RV. Lois is suspicious when she's an authorized user on the system's AI. Lois discovers that her alternate self was married to John, and they had a daughter. Her name was Natalie. When she and Clark discuss this information, it seems to shake them. That's because years ago, Lois and Clark were expecting a baby girl. They had a name picked out, Natalie. Tragically, Lois had a miscarriage. Jonathan, without knowing this, refers to Natalie as Sis. Superman decides to work with John, and John is released. Superman believes that if similar events will happen in their universe, then it is better to have John's help. Their partnership is uneasy, but eventually, mutual trust and respect are built. They face the main threat of Season 1 together. John tells Lois that while she is not his wife, it's still difficult for him to be around her. In a cliffhanger ending to Season 1, Natalie arrives. She sees Lois and thinks she's her mother. As Season 2 begins, Natalie learns that she is in a different universe. She has a difficult time with the doppelgangers at her old school. She yells at John that this Lois seems to be living a perfect life, married to Superman with 2 perfect sons. Lois tells Natalie that while she is not her mother, she hopes that they can become friends. Like John, it is hard for Natalie to trust Clark because he resembles the man who killed their Lois Lane. Over the course of the season, Natalie learns to accept this new reality. Natalie and the twins become friends, and eventually, she even saves Superman's life. She lets Lois comfort her when John briefly goes missing. When Natalie goes to save John, Jonathan tells her that she is their family. In Season 3, we see that the Kents and the Irons have a good relationship. Lois tells Natalie and John that she has cancer, and Natalie gives her a gift that belonged to her mother. John says that Lois is his friend. Natalie, Jonathan, and Jordan hang out together. John and Superman continue to work together. Perhaps you've already started to fill in the blanks for how this could be a metaphor for divorce. Here is how I see it. For a spouse, divorce can feel like a death. Perhaps it even feels like a new reality. A former spouse is now a different person, yet somehow the same. Perhaps the former spouse has moved on, and it would be easy to dislike or even blame the new partner. Yet, perhaps that partner is different than originally thought, and the former spouse can become a friend. And for children with divorcing parents, perhaps they also feel like it's a death and a new reality. They may learn about the divorce after their parents have discussed it. When parents get remarried, it can be difficult for the children to think they have a place in this new reality, and perhaps they feel abandoned. They may also dislike or blame the new partner. The relationship between the child and their parents may change. However, it's possible to create new dynamics and for a blended family to form. While there are a lot of TV shows and movies about divorce, we see that the 80s sitcoms and Superman and Lois are relying on the same narrative device to talk about divorce. Both rely on a deceased mother. Like most of the 80s sitcoms, this impacts a father and a daughter. They are enduring despite the tragedies they faced. However, in the 80s sitcoms, a deceased mother represented a complete absence. In Superman and Lois, she exists in a new form. Therefore, she has a voice and autonomy in the show where she was silent before. This wouldn't be possible in the earlier shows because they were grounded in reality. It's possible here because of the show's multiversal premise. It's this multiversal premise that allows Superman and Lois to reflect current attitudes around divorce. So, how have attitudes around divorce changed? Stigma around divorce has decreased since the 80s. Gallup found that in 1986, 60% of Americans wanted the government to make divorce in the U.S. more difficult. This was right before no-fault divorce laws started being passed. According to Insider, divorce rates peaked in the 70s and 80s, then continually dropped. And in 2017, Gallup found that 73% of US adults say divorce is morally acceptable. With this wider acceptance of divorce came a new paradigm for divorcing couples. If you've ever heard the term conscious uncoupling, you can probably thank Gwyneth Paltrow. She used it in 2014 to describe her divorce from Chris Martin. The term now has a place in pop culture. First created by therapist Catherine Woodward Thomas in 2009, it's a 5-step process that focuses on amicable divorces. An article from InStyle details the process well, so check out the link in the description. Step 4 concerns forgiveness and deciding what the new relationship will look like. Step 5 discusses making it possible for everyone to win, and each person's capability for the new relationship. It could be a lifelong friendship or a co-parenting relationship. And it's this version of divorce that I think Superman and Lois is trying to portray. The widespread social concern is no longer that divorce would cause societal collapse. The focus now is on rebuilding and maintaining healthy relationships in divorced families where possible. John is going through a process of coming to terms with his new reality. And despite the pain, he is able to build a friendship with Lois. It reminds me of Demi Moore and Bruce Willis supporting each other after their divorce. John and Clark are also able to build a friendship. And that reminds me of Jason Momoa and Lenny Kravitz being friends. John, Lois, and Clark are able to genuinely support each other as the show progresses. Superman and Lois shows that while divorce is difficult, the relationships don't have to remain bitter. Friendship is possible. With Natalie and the twins, blended families also get greater representation. According to Pew, 1 in 6 kids is living in a blended family. The multiversal premise of the show allows for Natalie and the twins to be genetic half-siblings, yet their relationship is more like step-siblings or friends. For me, this mix of found family, but also actual family, is the most compelling thing about the show. Before I conclude, I have one side note. As mentioned earlier, Lois in this universe had a miscarriage. I feel that a lesser show would use a miscarriage as a one-off plot point for character development. To have Lois's miscarriage be woven throughout her story in this way is a powerful choice from the creative team. With 1 in 4 pregnancies ending in miscarriage, this representation is important. That wraps up my look at the social commentary of Superman and Lois. What do you think? Drop a comment down below. If you liked this video, please subscribe. Thanks for watching.